At the beginning of this year, I made a video on the infamous 4 Horsemen of top lane, a quartet of champions known for their extreme carry potential and limitless outplay capability. They've become so legendary in top lane that their reputation goes beyond that, gaining notoriety even among jungle, mid, bot, and support players, given the eventuality that once the Horsemen are through with top lane, the other 4 roles are next in line to feel their wrath. The top lane happens to feature another quartet of champions with an equally high presence to some extent, who incidentally all being male, one would consider them the counterpart to the 4 Horsewomen, although for different reasons. But just like them, whether in the depths of Iron to the highest echelons of Challenger, any top laner worth their salt should have at least one of them as part of their champion pool, and more emphatically be versed in dealing with them, as these 4 alone, like their female colleagues, have comprised almost a quarter of all top lane picks in recent years. Aatrox, Darius, Jax, and Renekton, familiar faces no doubt considering I made a Why Everyone Plays episode on 3 out of 4 of them. I'm also certain the majority of you have something less than favorable to say about them. So today we'll be making a return to top lane and discussing yet another group of the 4 Horsemen, going through each one to document what makes them so powerful and widely used. As covered in the Horsewomen episode, the isolated nature of top lane causes the role's carry potential to take a different turn than the other 4 roles. With how likely it is for you to be left to your own devices, top lane is almost mandated to play under the assumption that no assistance will be given to them by their team, while at the same time expecting the enemy team will send all resources and manpower they can muster to make your life as difficult as possible. There's an extremely prevalent belief among top laners to hope for the best, but absolutely prepare for the worst. This is their primary way of carrying games, by drawing as much pressure as they can so that it doesn't go to the rest of their teammates. What separates the challenger top laners from the hearts like Silver 2s is whether or not the player crumbles under that pressure or manages to break through in spite of it. With this in mind, a major category of picks in top lane consists of lane bullies, champions known for a fairly dominant early game, having an even or more often positive matchup against most of the top laners, even amongst themselves. This is complemented by an equally strong if not stronger mid game, letting them take any advantages they garnered in lane and pressing that lead even further elsewhere. As you may know, because top lanes often left alone relative to the other 2 lanes, occasionally the outcome of the role hinges solely on matchups, as evident by top laners constantly requesting to be last in champ select and the reason most top laners hate playing on the blue side. Just as the 4 Horsewomen, Camille, Fiora, Riven, and Irelia dominate the role through their ability to overpower the competition through skill and execution, the 4 Horsemen, Aatrox, Darius, Jax, and Renekton exhibit comparable traits. One could even go as far as to say they thoroughly enjoy fighting multiple opponents at once, with each of them carrying something in their toolkit that becomes more efficient when battling more than just one person. And while they don't exactly possess the same extreme side lane and 1v1 pressure, with the exception of one of them, they make up for that by being easily among the most destructive forces in teamfights and skirmishes, forcing the enemy team to address them first and foremost lest they risk getting annihilated by their extreme damage output. At the same time, taking them out demands a superhuman effort, especially when behind, as they have far more conventional resilience than the 4 Horsewomen, who can withstand quite a bit of punishment to be fair, but certainly nowhere close to their male counterparts. Such effort often results in the enemy team exhausting more resources than they can afford to give, which makes finishing them off an elementary task for the rest of your team. The 4 Horsemen of top lane also share the distinction of being among the most difficult, if not outright impossible champions to make a comeback against once you fall behind. Even in the off chance you're playing someone with the potential to outscale them, if piloted by a capable player, these guys will never let you have that chance, bullying you for the next 10 to 15 minutes and then exerting their lead against the rest of your team. I should clarify that this category is notably more ambiguous than the 4 Horsewomen. For them, Gwen is about the only interchangeable member, whereas for the 4 Horsemen, they sometimes have to share their seat with other bruisers or bulky top laners, including Cassandre, Mordekaiser, Garen, and so on. However, I chose these 4 specifically for their consistency, as they tend to withstand shifts in the meta more effectively than others. So having established all that, let's go through each of them one at a time to elucidate why they're so good, starting with arguably the most widely played of the 4, Aatrox. Prevailing wisdom understands that there's no such thing as a truly safe blind pick in top lane, or any lane for that matter. Everyone has at least a handful of poor matchups, but Aatrox's popularity stems from the fact that he's probably the closest you can get to a truly safe blind pick. Even against losing matchups, he has the right set of abilities to survive lane with minimal losses. Aatrox's greatest strength has to be without a doubt his neutral game. Most melee champions are known for having a lackluster neutral due to their short attack range, with some of them being unable to exert pressure of any kind without retaliation. Aatrox stands out for being a melee champion with actual range. The first 2 casts of his Darken Blade have cast ranges of 625 and 475 to 500 respectively, being far enough for him to attack his opponent without getting struck back whatsoever, especially when you account for the brief knockup that comes with it and his ability to reposition himself with Dumbbell Dash during the cast. Executed correctly, Aatrox can repeatedly strike you with Qs to chip away at you while minimizing his own exposure. Said neutral pressure is accentuated by the absence of any cost to his abilities, but more importantly, the substantial battle healing he's innately equipped with. If you let him get a few too many pokes, you'll find yourself gradually bleeding out in HP while he suddenly regenerates back to full. Being a manaless champion with range and sustain makes for a very effective combination that can allow him to deal with all manner of champions comfortably at worst, but safety isn't the only thing he's known for. Assuming you land the sweet spot on all 3 attacks, Dark and Blade's total damage output reaches a staggering 420 base plus 540% total AD as of 14.10, the highest ratios in the game on a single ability, I believe. Granted, easier said than done, particularly with the mobility creep we've been experiencing as of late, but he doesn't have to necessarily land all 3 Qs to threaten your life. Aatrox can slowly whittle you down, then when he feels confident he can finish you off in one rotation, he can do so. However, assuming the Aatrox player mixes up their timing, positioning, and whatnot, they can make it very difficult to tell whether they're committing to an all-in or just going for poke damage. Outside of lane, Aatrox's teamfight pressure is almost second to none, becoming a literal raid boss especially with his ultimate. Thanks to the massive boost in AD and increased healing, his Q can dish out damage in the thousands while healing him equally as much, and with World Ender extending his duration upon takedown once he gets a kill, he can tear through everyone else. People greatly underestimate how strong this guy becomes too. At rank 3, World Ender's damage boost is 45% AD. I've seen many games where Fat Aatrox had over 700 AD, causing his Q to deal potentially over 4,000 damage in total per target. The challenge of course lies in whether you can actually play him correctly, and of the 4 horsemen he has the steepest learning curve, but there's a reason Aatrox has a consistent near double-digit pick rate. He's just a very solid champion who can account for many situations, and is one of the few quote-unquote melee top laners who can play extremely safe. Next top laner is Darius, a cornerstone of top lane owing to being the most straightforward of the 4 to play. An historical lane bully known for being the bane of many tanks' existence, in no small part thanks to his innate tank busting capabilities and high base damage. The number 1 rule of thumb when fighting a Darius is to never take him head on. He possesses one of the best all-ins of all time that even if you manage to avoid a Q or 2, he still has enough damage to kill you twice over. Upon reaching 5 stacks of hemorrhage, he gains a massive boost in AD and the ability to instantly apply 5 bleed stacks onto any target, likely subsequent ones, which in and of itself does very significant damage. The difference between a base Darius and Noxia Might Darius is like Super Saiyan Goku versus base Goku. In addition to his basic abilities dealing increased damage, his ultimate grows stronger the more bleed stacks there are on a target. Even in the early game, a full power Noxian Guillotine can do about 600 true damage, which is around 40 to 50% of most top laners' health pools by that. The challenge of fighting Darius is that, like I said, most top laners are known for having a poor neutral game. Some are outright unable to exert pressure without giving their lane opponent the same opportunity. Even a simple trade combo of auto, W reset, and Q can chunk you a fairly decent amount, and with his passive armor penetration, it's hard to really mitigate his damage. Assuming the Darius player is good at landing his Qs, it's similar to Aatrox where he can chip away at you while recovering from any damage you deal to him. Against melee champions of low mobility and no sustain of their own, Darius can be an extremely hard counter. But even against champions that look like they could be counters, he has the means to force interactions and likely come out on top. The real threat of this champion though is towards the mid to late game. Once he acquires more base damage and durability, the probability of him activating Noxia Might gets even higher, and at level 16 his ultimate damage becomes so great that all it takes is a single 5-stack bleed application from W or Q and then ultimate to literally one-shot squishy champions. So just like Aatrox, if he scores a reset, it's in your best interest to run the hell away from him as he becomes exponentially more dangerous to deal with. If there's ever a champion who embodies the notion of kill him first or else he kills your entire team, it would be Darius. Ironically, using a frontline to hold him down is a bad idea as it makes it easy for him to prime his stacks, and as I mentioned with how much armor penetration and true damage he has, Darius can make quick work of even beefy champions and then turn his rage onto you. Counterintuitive as it may sound, the best way to stop him is with full damage, taking him out before he reaches that legendary backloaded pressure he's known for, an equal combination of strength and sturdiness that few members of the roster are capable of dealing with directly. Third horseman is Jax, who ostensibly differs greatly from the other 3 as he's a skirmisher rather than a fighter, but his strengths are comparable in many respects. While his colleagues prefer to distribute their strength equally between abilities and auto attacks, Jax is almost entirely auto attack based. Consequently, that gives him the highest sustained damage output of the 4. Melee auto attackers almost universally have bad neutral games in light of them needing to get really close to you to attack, but what allows Jax to get away with murder is Counter-Strike, rendering him impervious to basic attacks of any kind, which many top laners are dependent on, even his own fellow horsemen. Counter-Strike also reduces AoE damage by 25%, giving him a token bit of defense against most damaging abilities. During those 2 seconds of evasion, he can freely attack as he pleases and then can decide whether he wants to use that 1 second stun to retreat to safety or to press the advantage. Not unlike Darius, Jax is one of those champions where long drawn out fights are heavily discouraged, with his passive granting him bonus attack speed with every successive auto attack, along with Grandmaster at Arms empowering his autos and granting bonus armor and magic resist. He can rip through just about everyone in the game. The best way to fight Jax is ideally to never engage him at all and just poke him down, which is not an option for most top laners. Once you reach the mid to late game, his incredible dueling power only continues to amplify, giving him side lane pressure level with the 4 Horsemen. Exemplifying his constant pressure, Jax is one of those champions who, while obviously stronger with his ultimate, doesn't really need it to fight. The difference between Jax with and without his ultimate isn't as measurable as other champions, but that also means this guy will always be a threat. Counter-Strike is one of the most overpowered basic abilities in the game, a massive you to champions who rely even remotely on auto attacks while at the same time being an auto attacker himself. He can make excellent use of either on-hit effect items or bruiser ones, whichever is more convenient for him. Once you make it to late game, this guy can have 380, 2.5 attack speed at least before they took out lethal tempo, and 300 armor and magic resist, making him the ultimate fighting machine. Admittedly, he doesn't have nearly the same raid boss pressure as his peers, but if he had that on top of everything else, that would be excessive. Final Horseman is Renekton, another staple of top lane for very apparent reasons. Like Aatrox, Renekton's a manaless champion with the ability to sustain himself. Courtesy of his point-and-click stun on Ruthless Predator, he also has a similar trade pattern as Jax, where he can go in, stun his target, deal damage, and then get back out, or continue attacking if he so chooses. Proper fury management and situational awareness can make him one of the deadliest champions in the early game, as he has a low cooldown AoE damaging ability that, if it strikes a champion, can heal for a decent amount while having a 1.5 second point-and-click stun, essentially guaranteeing he can land all his abilities on you. While Renekton's all-in pressure is definitely the weakest of the 4, it's unwise to believe you can take him on in long sustained battles without a fight. His Fury generation increases below half HP, while Dominus grants a huge boost of health and a magic damage aura that can actually deal an insane amount of damage if you stand in it long enough. Being a manaless champion with a strong burst rotation even in the early game, Renekton can make your laning phase a living hell if you so much as give him an inch. He's one of those champions with the right set of abilities to handle many situations, whether or not he's the most optimal at them. For example, Slice and Dice gives him fairly good mobility in chasing down ranged champions or anyone far enough away, while also being equipped with up to a 35% AoE armor shred. He has a notably far burst range compared to even the likes of Jax, and having 4 damaging abilities makes him a terror in skirmishes and teamfights. Renekton loves nothing more than a cluster, since if he applies an empowered Q and dice onto all targets, not only does he deal a metric ton of damage, but he also heals a ton and shreds everyone's armor, making the enemy team squishier for him and other physical attackers on his team. I think that's the main factor why so many people like to play him. He has the simplicity of a bruiser, but the skill expressiveness of a skirmisher. Now, he does fall off harder than his fellow horsemen, but even towards the late game, he's still a threat. Thanks to his innate strength and durability, you still have to respect what he can do, since worst case scenario, he can always take someone down with him by stunning and killing them. That's why he's so popular in pro play. You really can't put a price on a point-and-click 1.5 second stun. There's a reason most point-and-click stuns are only 1 second at most. If it were any higher, it would be broken. Overall, the 4 Horsemen are almost identical to the 4 Horsewomen in that they're very stable, independent, and reliable picks. While Fiora, Camille, Irelia, and Riven are much more dominant in the Apex tiers, Aatrox, Renekton, Darius, and Jax dominate almost every elo in the game, and they'll continue doing so. Being a Renekton co-main though, I do wish they would stop nerfing him just because he's popular in pro play, but that's a discussion for another time. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on the 4 Horsemen of top lane, along with if you think someone else deserves to be part of this category more than one of them. I know many are thinking about including Cassante, but in his defense, he's still a very new champion relative to these 4, so I feel like at best he would be an honorable mention, kind of like how Gwen is for the 4 Horsewomen. In any case, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be very much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and if you haven't, be sure to check out my video on the 4 Horsewomen of top lane if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.